Hey, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. It's a late night passing of thoughts. We are, at the moment, we are busy trying to get a church built. And we've had various comments. One chap, one of our regular subscribers, gave his view on churches, that he had never actually had a great love of churches, that he had always thought that the first thing on the agenda was collecting, well, doing the collection, getting the money, talking about tithing and all of that. And I know that I've had that opinion myself. There are, within a few miles of where we are, right opposite the most humble of nipa huts, sari stores, little fish stalls, and opposite the most grand, beautiful church. Really a thing of great beauty, great architectural magnificence. And I often pass that place, and then I look on the left and see this incredible architectural monument, and then I look on the right, or I even just drive a few cars lengths down, and I'm looking at the most humble dwellings and the poorest people. So yeah, I know what that feels like. But church, as I've come to know it since I met Beth, since I came to the Philippines, churches are not like these great, incredible monuments. They are basic buildings, almost like a hall, what in my childhood I would have called like a church hall. That would be something that was totally non-decorative, that was next to the church, and that's where things would happen, where people would get together, where services could come together. When well, in the case of, say, really bad storms, these places would become safe shelters. And so I never, once I got here and saw just how important a simple church is. We're really talking about a church that is maybe 20 or 25 feet wide by 30, 40, even 50 feet long. So we're really talking about something that's very simple. And in the ones that I've certainly been in of late, all with simple plastic chairs, none of the glorious, well, from my childhood, Roman Catholic things, where a great deal of skill and architectural planning has gone into making even a simple church. I remember the church of my childhood, which was St Wilfrid's. St Wilfrid's in Hume in Manchester in the UK. I remember I went back there years later, 30, 35 years later, and I got a new bicycle, and I'm an enthusiastic cyclist, or used to be. Now that we live up in the mountains, it's such a hassle to get down to the road. I don't even have a bike. But on this occasion, I bought a really nice bike, and I enjoyed riding so much. I put it on the train and went from London up to Manchester. And then once in Manchester, I started riding around the streets that I knew, which were, it turned out to be very few and far between, because Manchester is one of those cities where they've done a great deal of destruction, levelling entire acres, or for all I know, square miles of old housing, and putting up new flats, apartments, I don't know, multi-story apartment council places. Not a great improvement in my mind, but even when I tried to retrace my steps on the roads, thinking that, well, even if they knocked down some of the houses, the roads would still be there. No, that wasn't true either. So I ended up completely lost. But then, just quite suddenly, and it was a very strange, weird feeling, I saw the church of St. Wilfrid's School. I've been looking for the school and hoping to just peek in the gate and see the playground where I used to play as a kid. Just a little nostalgic trip back in time. It wasn't there. It turned out that the school had been knocked down long ago and built around, and now there's what I had always thought of as a child as a big church. It turned out to be a tiny chapel. I can't imagine that it was more than for a couple of hundred people, absolute max, maybe 100. And we used to go there after church, after school. We would go for one day a week, every Thursday, I think it was. We'd go, and there would be a service, and all the classes from the school would go there, and they'd go to a service. So we had a chance to be in that tiny church and look around. And in its own kind of way, it was quite beautiful. When I saw, surely how can it be St. Wilfrid's? Well, I went into the tiny little courtyard which was between the chapel and the rectory. And I remember when I'd been a little bit on the naughty side, my mother, as a really, really last resort, would, or did on one occasion at least, took me down to the rectory to see Father O'Reilly, and Father O'Reilly read me the Riot Act, albeit a little bit softer than my mother, and I went away with my mother feeling chastened. Well, I rang the bell to go into to see if anybody would answer the door, and a young novice came to the door, and I explained I used to go to St. Wilfrid's School. I was a pupil there, and I wondered if I could go in and just see the church. Well, she brought out a very ancient looking key that was about this long, a great rusty thing, and she opened the door. And I went in and I sat in my old place, and it brought back some good and some not so good memories, but it was worth the effort. Now, that was quite grand, that little church, compared to the church at Burgos, compared to the one that we're building at Bagakai right now. It was quite grand. It had all the stations of the cross. It had statues of Jesus with the burning heart, and of Mary, his mother, and statuary and beautiful benches where we knelt during the service. All of that was still there. Well, it's a far cry from the kind of way in which a church is actually used and utilized here in the Philippines, because it becomes a place where you can have a meeting. It becomes a place where after the service music is played, as in almost like karaoke, where people would try out, in our case, in our little church there, which was in the process of being built, but had not disturbed the little tiny half-built house that we'd started the church in, or that Pastor Manola had started the church in, and kids would get up and try their luck on the drums or the keyboard, and it was a communal atmosphere. People related to each other, people went round, shook hands with each other, people knew each other, and we met there. We used that as our meeting point when we went out and helped to celebrate the anniversary of another church which was high in the mountains and was opposite a place that they called the Sea of Clouds. And we went with about 20 or about 20 people, maybe 25 from our church, and between James and I in his Suzuki truck, he took his, I took ours in our truck. We took as many as we could, and then we topped up with motorcycles and we went up into the mountains, saw the Sea of Clouds, and then we went to church. Exactly the same kind of church, like a hall. And people were there, people owned the place. They were not in there pretending to be holy. They went, they sang, and they danced, and they had food, and the food was served in the church. So, in a way, you know, our friend who doesn't like churches, quite possibly, if he came to our church and saw the way in which the building is used, it may make him change his mind. No names mentioned, but he'll know who he is. And we're working hard on making that little church happen. And hopefully by the end of this week, or certainly early next week, we should have that concrete beam, which is all precast, shuttered up into a mould, and then poured into the top of the walls, and it ties the whole building in together before the roof goes on. And that hopefully should go on Monday or Tuesday. Thanks for looking in. This is just a waffling on, as I am prone to do. Bye for now.